This video contains spoilers up to episode 62 of the ReZero anime. It does not spoil or allude to the events of the novels in any way, and is intended for anime onlys. Therefore, please do not discuss future events or cut content from the novels in the comments. At its core, ReZero is a character study. Previously, I made a video discussing Natsuki Subaru's insecurities and how they're a fundamental part of his heroism. In this video, I'll discuss the most insecure character in ReZero, Regulus Corneas, who mirrors this part of Subaru but turned up to the extreme. First, I'll go through some earlier Regulus scenes and examine their new layers with the added context of Season 3. Let's start with episode 26. The first time we see the Sin Archbishop of Greed, Regulus Corneas, we're immediately introduced to his victim complex. Despite using his authority to decimate the ground dragon carriages, he claims that Krush ordered her knights to trample him when he was just minding his own business. Now that we know how his authority works, it's obvious that this isn't the case. When Regulus frames himself as the victim, he also tries to convince his opponent that he's merciful despite what they've done to him. This may be why he shows just a little bit of patience at Krush demanding his name, compared to his reaction when Fortuna does it. The difference is that, from his point of view, Krush has already wronged him, so he uses this as an opportunity to show off his humility. Meanwhile, Fortuna hadn't done anything wrong, so he had to find a reason to be upset with her. The front breaks down the second Krush attacks him, and we immediately see his true colors as he cuts her arm off. Furthermore, his justification is that she violated his right to free speech, which further emphasizes his victim mindset. When most people, myself included, first watched the scene, we may have thought that Regulus's outrage at his rights being violated stemmed from some sort of ideological belief about rights, freedom, or conversation. However, we eventually discover that his reasons are significantly more egocentric. Later in the scene, Regulus criticizes Lai Betenkaidos' petty indulgences as a way to cleanse himself of the act he just committed. He also said that he hates fighting to make his previous action seem like a rare occurrence for him, or something that he did only because Krush deserved it. Furthermore, he's genuinely surprised when Rem decides to fight back against him, despite his explanation that everything he did was justified. Despite petty indulgences being beneath him, Regulus gets Rem back by pushing a wall of stopped wind towards her in the middle of her fight with Lai, and her name and memories are eaten right after. The next time we see Regulus is in episode 42, during Emilia's trial. I already discussed his reaction to Fortuna asking who he is, and how it contrasts to his interactions with Krush, but the scene has something even more central to his character. It's when Fortuna says, "For a man, you sure seem to like talking a lot." Now that we know he's deeply insecure about being made fun of by women, and that he wanted to make Fortuna his 79th wife, it's obvious why this is the angriest we had seen him up to that point. In episode 43, Regulus asks Betelgeuse if he has something against him when he gets frustrated at Pandora's appearance, once again taking practically any questioning of him as a personal insult. However, what's interesting is that when Pandora tells Regulus not to criticize him too much, Regulus actually bows to her and shuts up for a bit. This is the only time he actually listens to someone telling him to stop what he's doing, and a sign that he respects Pandora's authority and the witch's cult as greater than his own. Later in the episode, after Regulus cuts off Betelgeuse's arm, he clarifies that he isn't doing it because he's a sadist, similarly to his words to Rem after cutting off Krush's arm. The second time that Pandora tells Regulus not to criticize Betelgeuse too harshly, he's starting to build frustration towards her. Instead, he takes it out on Geuse again. Something interesting is that Pandora calls Regulus more special and perfect than anyone, which is similar to how he calls himself the most fulfilled person several times in Season 3. Fortuna hitting him in the face with an alhuma further increases his frustration, and we see further into who he really is. Who gave you the right? Who gave you the permission to interfere with me? Me. And this is the moment that Pandora tells Regulus to calm his anger. Twice. This is what happens when you mouth off to me. Don't interfere with me. Don't interrupt when I'm talking. This is nothing but textbook insecurity, and Regulus's absurd level of power allows him to cover it up with rage. And finally, Regulus is sent away, and we hear about his many wives for the first time. Regulus's insecurity was there in every scene we'd seen of him in Season 2, and as the events in the story make him increasingly frustrated, it's on full display in the second core of Season 3. For the rest of the video, I'll focus on Episode 62, his named episode, and point out more ways that his insecurity manifests. As Emilia freezes his wives, Regulus adopts the role of the victim again, lambasting her and Subaru for all they've put him through despite achieving no results. It's also worth paying special attention to how many misogynistic insults he makes. I won't repeat all of them word for word, but Regulus makes several sexually degrading comments towards Emilia, which is to be expected of someone afraid of being laughed at by women and who only marries virgins. Despite it being implied that Regulus has never had sex with his wives, he's obsessed with purity and uses it to demean them. After this, Regulus again feels the need to shame Geuse, and he ends up getting defeated by Geuse's ability. Here, I want to point out a mistranslation. When Emilia slams him into the pillar, the correct translation is, "What did you do to the authority of greed? To my rights." The first part was fixed by Crunchyroll, but the last phrase is still translated as "my authority," which misses the nuance that he equates his authority to his rights. After all, his authority is what makes his behavior possible, as without it, he wouldn't have been able to live out his power fantasy. This leads to the payoff of Regulus's victim complex, as he accuses Subaru and Emilia of giving him an unfair 2-on-1 fight. Emilia points out that what he says changes from one line to the next, and that his sentences are empty and incomprehensible. In fact, he does this to the point of not remembering what he said in the past. There are many examples of this in Season 3. One instance is him inviting Subaru to the wedding, and then saying that no men were invited when he crashes it with Reinhard. Another is saying that a pretty face is all that matters in love, and yet he calls being fixated on appearances the most shallow form of relationship there is. The first part of each of these examples were both in Episode 53, while him contradicting them were in Episode 58, so this feels very intentional. When Emilia finally says that he pities Regulus more than anyone else in the world, it must be the greatest possible insult to him. As a weak and insecure man, avoiding pity from women is one of his biggest motivations. Finally, I think that Regulus's legendary rant in the sky is the most self-explanatory showcase of his insecurities that you can find. He once again begins by acting as the victim, then reaffirms that he's the most complete and fulfilled individual. He denies having any fault in the situation, and expresses grief over being pitied. Then finally, we hear just how afraid he is of people laughing at him. There's another important mistranslation that I want to point out. Regulus doesn't say, "It's not that I didn't let them laugh." He says, "It's not that I couldn't make her laugh," with her referring to his first wife. This is a huge distinction and a vital point of characterization that'll unfortunately be missed by a lot of viewers. Regulus doesn't want to be laughed at by women, but he does want to be able to make women laugh. Feeling this way is only natural for a man. Men want women to admire and be attracted to them, not to laugh at them, and the fear of being laughed at by girls is something that many boys struggle with when they're younger. Furthermore, being able to make a girl laugh makes us feel really good. Hearing a woman laugh makes men feel more secure in their masculinity, which is exactly what Regulus lacks. His claim that it's not as if he couldn't make his first wife laugh only goes to show that he could never make any girl laugh. And that's why he forbids his wives from putting on any expressions. The reason he gave previously was that he hates when girls turn ugly while laughing. But does any guy really think this? To me, it seems more like a convenient excuse. Rather than hating women and demanding them to be pure, Regulus would have been far more fulfilled had he picked up some basic social cues. Finally, Regulus's final thoughts are just as shallow as he is. Once again, He's only concerned with what people think of him to the very end, agonizing over Emilia feeling joy that she avenged Fortuna and Betelgeuse. Even though Emilia doesn't even remember him, he's just that insignificant to her. It reminds me of Subaru in episode 18. At heart, I'm just a small, cowardly, filthy piece of trash who's always worried about how others see me, and nothing about me has changed. It's impressive just how much this quote describes Regulus, not only because he's insecure and worried about how others see him right to the end, but because Regulus's authority literally allows him to be unchanging and never admit his own flaws to improve as a person. And in the end, he never does change. He dies alone, thinking that all his wives have been killed, and he's given an empty title card to represent his empty character. Even calling him empty again reminds me of Subaru's speech, and when he called himself empty and said he had no character. But admitting it to himself is what allowed him to change. Regulus never admits it, and therefore remains an empty character to the end. To me, that's why he's such a great one. I hope you enjoyed this video on Regulus Corneas. If you liked it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.